The world had always seen Michael Jordan as something unreachable, a giant of sports, a man who seemed made of steel and dreams. Six-time NBA champion, two-time Olympic gold medalist, MVP, the ultimate symbol of excellence. His silhouette became a global icon, his career a benchmark, his life a legend. But what the eyes of the world couldn't see, what they never had a chance to see, was what hid behind all the gleaming trophies, the well-rehearsed interviews, and the smiling appearances at gala events. Michael was tired. Tired of smiling for the world while hiding a pain that followed him like a shadow. A pain that neither time, nor millions of dollars, nor deafening applause could silence. It was July 23rd, the date he could never erase from his heart. On that day, every year without fail, he would vanish from the world. No appointments, no obligations. The phone stayed off, the doorbell ignored. It was the one day Michael Jordan ceased to be a public figure and returned to being just a grieving son. That year in particular, the weight felt heavier. Michael woke up to the sound of rain tapping against the windows of his house in Chicago. The storm from the night before had left the sky gray, and the weather mirrored exactly how he felt inside. Time seemed to stand still. He rose slowly from the armchair where he'd fallen asleep, wrapped in a thin blanket, wearing an old gray t-shirt and sweatpants. The living room was silent, except for the soft crackling of the fireplace. He walked to the bookshelf and picked up an old picture frame. Inside, a slightly faded photo showed him and his father in a simple moment. No trophies, no cameras, no uniforms. Just the two of them sitting on an old wooden bench, laughing at something he could no longer remember. But his father's smile, that smile he could never forget. James Raymond Jordan. A man with a soft voice, a huge heart, and unwavering faith in his son. He was the first to believe. He was the one who said, "You don't have to be the best in the world, Michael. You just have to give your best every day." And he did. But at what cost? How many times did he look to his side in the greatest moments of his career and feel his father's absence like a deafening echo? How many times did he just want to hear that laugh again, or receive that silent hug that said everything, without words? That morning, Michael didn't want to be the superstar, nor the billionaire, nor the idol. He just wanted to be a son. And more than that, he wanted to understand why that pain still hurt so deeply, even after so many years. Why the emptiness felt even greater now as time passed. Maybe it was age. Maybe it was longing. Maybe it was the feeling that something was still unfinished. Sitting by the fireplace, the photo in his hands, Michael felt a tear slide down his cheek. He never cried in front of anyone, but there, in the silence, there was no audience, only memories. "I'm not done, Dad," he murmured as if speaking to his very soul. "There's something I still need to do, but I don't know what it is." Outside, the rain intensified, and then, as if the universe were answering that confession, an overwhelming urge to leave washed over him. An impulse, almost unexplainable. It wasn't an escape, it was a calling, as if something or someone was guiding him back to his roots. That's when he decided. The next morning, he would board a plane to North Carolina, to the house where he grew up, to the place where it all began, to the last home where his father had been alive. Michael didn't know it yet, but that trip would change everything, because there, among old walls and forgotten memories, he would find something his father had left behind, something that had waited patiently to be discovered, something that would transcend time, silence, and even death. 7 letters, 7 truths, 7 steps toward a promise he had made and forgotten. But before discovering that, he had to have the courage to return, to face the past, to listen to what only the heart could still hear, to understand that sometimes a father's love is so strong, not even death can silence it. The plane cut through the cloudy sky gently, as if respecting the silence of the man sitting by the window. Michael Jordan, one of the most recognizable faces in modern history, sat there, incognito, wearing a low cap and eyes lost on the horizon. This was no business trip, nor a triumphant return. It was something far more intimate and inexplicably necessary. The destination? Wilmington, North Carolina. More precisely, the old house where he had grown up. The place where laughter was more real, where Christmas smelled of pine and cinnamon, where his father's voice echoed on Sunday mornings. It was also the place where he learned to fall, to rise, and to believe. As the rental car pulled up in front of the old, partially restored house, Michael stayed seated for a few seconds. He took a deep breath, looked around. Everything seemed smaller than in his memory, and at the same time, so immense in meaning. He stepped out slowly, hesitantly, as if every inch of ground carried buried memories. The house, bought by him years ago for preservation, was empty. No one had lived there since James passed. The windows were closed but still clean. The garden flowers, though modest, grew strong, as if patiently awaiting someone's arrival. Michael turned the old key. The door creaked, revealing the passage of time. And then he stepped inside. The smell, that unmistakable smell. Wood, old paper, and a faint citrus scent his mother used to use to clean the furniture. A blend of the past and a sense of belonging. The same aroma that wrapped around him when he came home from school with scraped knees and a light heart. The silence was thick, but comforting. He walked through the room, touching furniture he hadn't seen in decades. His father's bookshelf was still there. Titles worn by time but sacred through memory. He smiled when he saw a copy of The Old Man and the Sea with his father's handwriting scribbled along the edge of the cover. For Michael, persistence is stronger than luck. The kitchen still had the same blue curtains. The living room couch still had the slightly reclined backrest where his father used to nap after dinner. Every corner was a portal, every object, a time machine. But it was when he climbed the old wooden staircase that his heart began to beat faster. At the end of the hallway stood James's old room. The doorknob was cold. He turned it slowly and stepped inside. This was where his father used to write his notes, where he read his books, where he listened to the radio softly before falling asleep. And this was also, according to his mother, where James would spend hours alone, reflecting, as if he were speaking to God. The room was covered in white sheets over the furniture, like ghosts guarding the past. Michael began uncovering them one by one, revealing an oak desk, a chair marked by use, and a half-empty bookshelf. In the corner of the room, something caught his eye. A small old toolbox leaning against a loose floorboard. That hadn't been there before, and there was something odd about that part of the floor. A slight elevation, barely noticeable. Moved by an unexplainable feeling, he knelt down and pushed at the board with his hands. It gave way easily. Beneath it, hidden in the space between the beams, was a small, aged metal safe. Michael's eyes widened. His heart began to race, as if it recognized something before even seeing it. He carefully lifted the safe, placed it on the desk, and examined it. It was locked, but the clasp was simple. Just a gentle push was enough to open it. Inside, there lay a set of old envelopes, 7 in total, each one numbered by hand, in his father's unmistakable handwriting. Letter 1, for when you are lost. Letter 2, for when you don't know how to go on. Letter 3, for when you find someone like you, and so on. Michael felt his throat tighten. He brought a hand to his face and took a deep breath. It was as if James had known he would return someday, as if he had left this here, hidden beneath the very floor that supported his childhood, as one last gift, one final conversation, one last act of love. With trembling hands, he held the first envelope, but he didn't open it right away. He pressed it to his chest, closed his eyes, and felt as if he were in his father's arms again, as if James had been waiting for this moment, for this day, for this instant of reunion. Michael cried, not in despair, but in gratitude. And there in the same room where his father dreamed his dreams, he knew, with a certainty that came not from the mind, but from the soul, the journey was only beginning. The letter rested between Michael's fingers as if it had weight. Not physical, but emotional. A simple envelope, paper yellowed with time. On the front, a firm, almost ceremonial handwriting. Letter 1, for when you are lost. He sat slowly in the wooden chair in front of his father's old desk. The late afternoon light streamed through the window in slanted rays, painting the room in a golden, melancholic hue. Outside, the world kept moving, but inside, time seemed suspended. Michael took a deep breath. With trembling hands, he broke the seal and removed the carefully folded paper. The handwriting was unmistakable, serene, fatherly, alive. And then he began to read. My son, if you're reading this, then something inside you brought you back. Something called to you, or perhaps something was missing. Sometimes the world will give you a standing ovation, and you'll still feel alone. Other times you'll be surrounded by people, and still feel lost inside. I knew this day would come, because life, my son, isn't about the finish line. It's about the invisible paths the soul walks. And no one, not even a champion like you, can escape the moments when nothing seems to make sense. If you're lost, Michael, know that it doesn't make you less. It only makes you human. I saw you achieve the impossible. I saw you lift crowds. But I also saw the moments you were suffocating in the silence of your own room. I saw when you had to be strong for the world and forgot to be honest with yourself. You've always been intense, always pushed everything to the limit. But now I ask you, stop, breathe, feel, return to the center, return to yourself. Do you remember when you tried your first layup and fell flat on your face? You were embarrassed, wanted to leave. But I held your shoulder and said, son, falling isn't failure. Staying on the ground is. Well, I'm telling you again, even from far away, get up, not in a hurry, but with purpose. You're not lost. You're just in the space between who you were and who you're ready to become. With eternal love, your father, James. Michael couldn't hold back the tears. The words pierced through his mind like arrows, but hit straight at his heart. He leaned his elbows on the desk and brought his hands to his face. Quiet, restrained sob, but overwhelming. Not of sadness, but of reunion. He had never felt so seen, so understood, as he did in that moment. It was as if his father knew exactly what he was going through, even decades after his death. As if that letter had been written yesterday. How many times had he gotten lost within himself and disguised it with perfect interviews, motivational speeches, smiles calibrated for cameras? How many times had he feared looking weak? How many times had he suppressed emotions in the name of an image? And there, sitting in the same chair where his father had written those words, Michael felt something being reborn, something he hadn't felt in years, vulnerability, and at the same time, strength. The letter had touched a forgotten part of his essence, something deeper than fame, older than basketball itself. He stood up and walked to the window, looked at the sky tinted orange. The rain had stopped. A beautiful silence spread through the neighborhood. The afternoon breeze made the tree leaves dance, as if they somehow knew that something sacred had just happened inside. Michael smiled even though his eyes were still wet, because in that moment he understood. He wasn't lost. He was just finding the path again, and the one guiding him was his father, in his heart, in his memory, and now, in the letters. He returned to the desk and looked at the other 6 envelopes. If the first letter had already shaken him so deeply, what else was to come? Each envelope was a step towards something he didn't even know he was searching for, a truth deeper than victory, a legacy greater than any trophy. And for the first time in a long while, he wasn't in a hurry. He closed his eyes and gave thanks to his father, to life, and to the reunion. That night, Michael Jordan didn't leave the old house. It was as if his feet refused to let him. As if, in some mysterious way, he knew that leaving would mean losing something far too precious to abandon. He improvised an old mattress on the wooden floor, in the same room where he had found the letters. An old blanket and a pillow kept in a drawer were enough. And there, under the roof of his childhood, he slept like he hadn't in years. No city noise, no artificial lights, no weight on his back. He woke to the sound of birds and the distant aroma of damp wood. The house was silent, but not empty. Michael felt a presence, not a physical one, but emotional, as if the echoes of laughter, conversations, and silences from long ago still lived there. in the walls, the floor, the little details. He rose slowly and went downstairs. Each step made the floorboards creak, producing an almost musical sound. In the living room, the old couch was covered in a fine layer of dust. Michael ran his hand over it and sat down, sinking into the same corner where his father used to sprawl on Sunday afternoons after lunch. There, James would put on his slippers, rest his feet on the coffee table, and nap while listening to jazz on the old radio. Michael closed his eyes and allowed himself to listen. But there was no jazz. What there was memory. Flashbacks appeared with stunning clarity. He was 9 years old, and his father was teaching him how to properly hold a baseball in the backyard. It's not about strength, son. It's about timing. Everything in life is about timing. He was 13, and James waited for him at the school gate, even in the pouring rain. You never have to walk alone. He was 17, and after being cut from the school team, he locked himself in his room. His father knocked on the door, entered without a word, and just sat beside him. They stayed in silence, but that silence said everything. That house was a time capsule. Every object told a story. In the kitchen shelf, Michael found James's old mug with the inscription, "World's Best Dad," a Father's Day gift from 1985. In the living room drawer, he found a yellow deck of cards they used to play with on Saturday afternoons. And above the fireplace, an old black and white photo. James and Michael side by side, identical smiles, eyes glowing. The silence of the house was full of echoes. And the more Michael moved through it, the more he realized. He wasn't rediscovering his father. It was his father who was guiding him, as if he had left every detail meticulously prepared. Back in the bedroom, he sat before the 6 remaining envelopes, his gaze fixed on the second one. Letter 2, for when you don't know how to go on. He held it for a while, but something told him it wasn't the right moment yet. Before moving forward, something needed to be understood. Not with the mind, but with the heart. So he got up and went to the garage. There were old boxes filled with photos, stored objects, keepsakes that had been packed away after James's death. Michael began opening them one by one. He found childhood photos, a 5th birthday party with a simple cake and smiling eyes, a trip to the beach where James carried Michael on his shoulders, a rare image of James playing basketball with him on a cracked concrete court. The ball wasn't official, the hoops were crooked, but the moment was perfect. In a smaller box, wrapped in a red cloth, was his father's wristwatch. Michael picked it up with reverence. It was a simple leather model with a scratched glass and the hands frozen at 2:03 p.m. The exact time James had been declared dead in 1993. Michael felt a shiver, not from fear, but from respect. Time had stopped, but love hadn't. He put the watch on his wrist, and in that moment, a different sensation washed over him. It was as if his father were saying, "Now you carry my time. Now it's you who decides the rhythm of your truth." Michael returned to the room with the watch on his wrist and sat back down at the desk. He took a deep breath. Now, yes. He was ready for the next letter. Michael stared at the envelope for long minutes. His fingers traced the edges, as if touching a sacred relic. The paper was the same, aged yet firm. On the front, once again, the calm handwriting, Letter 2, for when you don't know how to keep going. There was something strange about that moment. Part of him wanted to tear the envelope open in urgency, to quickly discover what his father had written, as if the answer to his pain was hidden there, between lines and memories. But another part, a deeper one, asked for patience, respect. Michael stood up, opened the window of the room, and let the morning air in. The bird's song, the rustling of the leaves, and the scent of damp grass created a silent, almost spiritual soundtrack. He returned to the desk, sat down, and with steady hands opened the second letter. My son, have you ever asked yourself why we keep going even when everything inside us wants to stop? It's not out of strength, nor pride, and even less out of obligation. We keep going because there's a spark inside us, small, discreet, but alive. And when everything goes dark, it's that spark that guides us. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you're exhausted from pretending to be strong for others. Maybe you're wondering, Why keep going? Why still fight? And the answer, Michael, isn't in the titles. It's not in the records. It's in the boy who still lives inside you. The one who dreamed big, not because he wanted to be famous, but because he believed the sky was only the beginning. It's not wrong to pause. It's not weakness to slow down. The problem isn't stopping. The problem is forgetting why you started. Remember when you cried alone in the bathroom after a loss? You thought I didn't see, but I did. And that day while you cried, I sat outside the door on the floor, in silence. Because I knew you didn't need advice. You just needed not to be alone. And that's what I want you to know now. You are not alone. Not today, not ever. When you don't know how to go on, my son, don't go on out of duty. Go on out of love. For what you do, for what you represent, for what you're yet to discover. And if the walk becomes too heavy, remember, sometimes the next step isn't to run, it's just to breathe. With all my love, James. The letter gently fell from Michael's hands. It was as if time had stopped again, as if those words written decades ago had been tailor-made for the exact moment he was living now. How was it possible? It was as if his father had seen it all, felt it all, as if he had predicted the falls, the dilemmas, the emptiness. Michael stood up, heart still racing, walked over to the old mirror next to the wardrobe, looked at himself. He didn't see the global icon. He didn't see Air Jordan, the symbol, the myth. What he saw was the boy, the child who only wanted his father to be proud. Behind the muscles, the victories, the fame, that boy was still there. And in that instant, something changed. Michael gave himself permission to stop, to feel, to let go of the weight he had carried for so long. He walked to the backyard and sat in the old rocking chair James used to use. There, he closed his eyes and cried. Not from pain, but from release. He understood now. He didn't have to carry it all alone anymore. His father was still with him, not in body, but in words, in memories, in legacy. And that was enough to keep going, even without knowing the exact path, even without all the answers. He would go on, one step at a time, and when he forgot, there would be more letters to remember. Night was falling when Michael arrived at the community center for the charity event. The gathering was simple, but important. He had been invited to give a talk to underprivileged youth, inspiring them to fight for their dreams, regardless of hardships. Something he knew how to do well, something he was used to doing. But that night, there was a different feeling in the air. He walked through the hallways, greeting some of the children and teenagers. Most were excited, as if they were part of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Michael had always had that aura of an icon, someone who turned the ordinary into extraordinary. But as he walked between the tables, something made him stop, a presence. In the corner of the room, a young boy was sitting alone, watching the others. His eyes sparkled with an intensity Michael knew very well, the shine of pure determination, of the will to win, of the flame that made one dream big. The boy had nothing extraordinary about his appearance, but there was something in him that drew Michael's attention, like an invisible energy. Michael walked over with a warm smile. "Hey, are you okay?" Michael asked, using the friendly tone he always reserved for those around him. The boy looked up and, for a moment, said nothing. He just sat there, locking eyes with Michael, as if trying to understand what made that man be there, so close. "Yes, I'm okay," he finally replied, his voice soft, yet filled with a quiet strength. Michael sat beside him. "You know, it's not easy to do this, but the fact that you're here already says a lot about who you are. What's your name?" "Daniel," the young man said, still with a shy but firm smile. "And yours is Michael Jordan, right?" Michael chuckled softly. "Yes, that's me." The two stood in silence for a moment, just observing the room. But then, Daniel asked something that caught Michael off guard. "Have you ever been afraid of not being good enough? Of failing?" Michael looked at the young man. Such a simple question, yet so deep. He knew that doubt lived in many hearts, and in a way, had once lived in his too. "I was afraid. Very afraid. Sometimes fear is what keeps us moving. The secret isn't the absence of fear, Daniel. The secret is to keep going in spite of it. Daniel looked at him with even greater intensity, as if those words were a map to something deep within him. Michael wondered why this kid was affecting him so much. "I see something in you," Michael finally said, breaking the silence. "You have the same spark in your eyes I had when I was younger, when I believed I was going to change the world, when everything still seemed possible." Daniel lowered his head, as if pondering those words. I I just don't know where to start." Michael stayed silent for a moment, feeling the weight of that sentence. He knew exactly what it meant. The beginning is always the hardest part. The fear of not knowing which step to take. The uncertainty. "Start with what you have," Michael said, with a wisdom only years could offer. "The only thing you need right now is to begin. The rest will fall into place along the way. And remember, whenever you need help, you're not alone. There's always a hand reaching out to support you." He looked at Daniel, and in that look, there was something more. A sense of fulfilled destiny, as if this meeting had been planned, as if he was there not just to inspire, but to be the turning point in that boy's life. Daniel lifted his head and with a genuine smile said, "I'll try, Michael. I promise I'll try." Michael smiled. He knew Daniel's promise was sincere, and more than that, he knew that this young man was a reflection of something much bigger. He wasn't there just to give a speech. He was there to witness the very promise he once made to his father come to life before his eyes. "That's all you can do, Daniel. Try, and the rest will come with time." The young man looked at Michael with gratitude and a sparkle in his eyes that strongly resembled a certain 9-year-old boy once staring at the sky, dreaming the impossible. In that moment, Michael felt his father's legacy being passed on. He had fulfilled his promise. Not with grand gestures, not with trophies or campaigns, but through a simple meeting, a meeting that would change Daniel's life, and perhaps in some way would change his own as well. The house was quiet again. Michael had spent the entire day thinking about his encounter with Daniel, reflecting on his words, his promises, and the silent transformation happening within him. Still wearing his father's watch, he sat at the table, facing the third letter. The envelope was more worn than the others, but the handwriting remained steady, with the same calmness as before. He hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of those words. When he opened it, his father's words began to echo in his mind. "My son, if you've made it this far, you've already understood something very important. Great moments don't come only from great victories. They're born from encounters. And one day, you'll meet someone like you once were to me. Do you remember when you were younger and often felt invisible, as if the world passed you by without really seeing what was there? You had a giant soul, but it was hidden in the shadows. Until one day, everything changed, and you became more than what people saw. You became the man I always knew you would be. I knew this day would come. I knew that one day you would cross paths with someone like you once were. Someone who, even though invisible to the world, would have a giant soul, a passion overflowing from within. You'll know when you meet him, not by words nor by actions. You'll know because he'll remind you of me. He will carry in his eyes the same sparkle you once had. He will be strong, but also vulnerable. He will be a reflection of everything you once were. When that happens, son, don't forget, he needs you. Not to become great. He already is. But to remind him that, even if the world sees him as invisible, he can still change it in ways only the heart can understand. I love you, James. Michael read the letter several times, each word resonating with a clarity he had never imagined. He didn't fully understand it at the time, but deep down, he knew. The conversation with Daniel, that unexpected connection, was no coincidence. He had never stopped to consider just how cruel the world could be to those on the margins. That boy Daniel, with his shy smile and that sparkle in his eyes, was more than an inspiration. He was the key to the promise he had made to his father. Michael got up from the table and walked to the window. Outside, the city of Chicago was still alive, but to him in that moment, everything seemed to slow down. He could see Daniel's face, could feel the energy from that exchange of glances, that genuine moment of connection. It was as if his father had spoken through that encounter. Michael felt a weight in his chest, but also a lightness. He finally understood that true greatness wasn't in trophies or public victories, but in the ability to see the invisible, to recognize the giant soul of someone the world ignored, someone who, in truth, had the power to transform lives. He picked up his father's watch and looked at it. Time felt more meaningful now, not because it was running out, but because he knew that every moment was precious. And in that moment, he felt as if his father was there, telling him once again, legacy is made of moments like this. It's not what you achieve alone. It's what you share with those who need it most. Michael smiled, eyes brimming with tears, and he knew that no matter what lay ahead, he would fulfill the promise, not for himself, but for all those who still hadn't been seen. He knew now. Daniel wasn't just another young man. He was a reflection of his own story, and Michael, now more than ever, knew how to change someone's life. Michael knew he couldn't let Daniel walk alone. Something inside him told him that this young man needed more than inspiring words and quick advice. He needed something deeper, something only experience could provide. He didn't want Daniel to repeat the same mistakes he had made along his journey, and more than that, he wanted to help him achieve success in a way that was true, without losing himself along the way. He decided to act in secret, not to hide his help, but because he believed that for Daniel, the true value wasn't in financial assistance, but in the life lessons he could offer. Michael knew his own path hadn't been easy, that the road to the top was filled with obstacles, but also with lessons that shaped who he had become. In the days following their meeting, Michael began to approach Daniel discreetly. He invited him to private training sessions, not in crowded gyms, but in quiet spaces where they could talk about life, challenges, and opportunities. During these sessions, Michael not only taught about the game of basketball, but also about the discipline needed to achieve any dream. He spoke about the power of mindset, the importance of persevering through adversity, and most importantly, the importance of being authentic, as his father had always taught him. "You won't do this for the money," Michael said, with a serious yet wise look in his eyes. "You'll do it because it's your truth. When you align with what you really want, things start to happen." Daniel began to realize that something in his life was changing. At first, he thought he was just receiving exclusive training, but soon he understood that Michael was giving him something far more precious, a vision of what was possible when you believed in yourself, when you had the courage to follow a path that the world might not understand. Over time, Daniel began to blossom, not only in terms of basketball skills, but also in his way of seeing the world. The confidence Michael instilled in him was palpable, and soon he was not only overcoming his own limitations, but also becoming an example to others around him. Opportunities began to arise: a scholarship to a prestigious university, recognition among the young people in his community. He was thriving in a way Michael never could have predicted, but deep down he knew it was possible. There were moments when Michael would discreetly step back, observing from afar. He saw Daniel grow not only as an athlete but as a person. It was as though the essence of James, the silent strength and unconditional love he had always given Michael, was now being transferred to that young man. With each step Daniel took, Michael felt the echo of the promise he made, as though by caring for this young man, he was fulfilling something far greater than he had ever imagined. However, there was a turning point. Michael was no longer just helping Daniel secure his future. He was also starting to see in Daniel what he may never have been able to see in himself, the true reflection of his father, James. Daniel had the same humility, the same silent greatness, the same purity. He didn't need big stages or fame to shine. He shone with his heart, his dedication, and his desire to do more. In a particularly touching moment, while Michael observed Daniel from a distance, the young man turned, a sincere smile on his face, and did something unexpected. Without Michael knowing, he organized a small tribute in his community, an event where he told everyone about the impact Michael had had on his life. Without mentioning the details of the financial help or the private training, he spoke about what Michael had taught him about being a man of character, about fighting for one's dreams, and most importantly, about giving back to others. When Michael heard about the event, he felt a wave of emotion. He had hoped Daniel would thrive, but he didn't know he would become an inspiration to others, just as he had been for Michael. In that moment, Michael understood the true meaning of what his father had told him, that he would need to recognize those who were invisible to the world but had a giant soul. Daniel was that, and Michael was too. Michael smiled to himself, and for the first time in a long while, he felt he had fulfilled a mission his father had started. James's legacy was manifesting in a way he could never have predicted, but he knew this was what his father wanted. For him, Michael, to help others flourish, just as he had been helped when he was a child. Michael was alone in the locker room, the arena empty around him. The echo of footsteps against the concrete walls was his only company. He sat on the bench, away from the rest of the team, feeling a sense of emptiness he couldn't fully identify. Even after all the victories, the broken records, the joys shared with the fans, he still felt incomplete, as if something was missing. It was there in that moment of introspection that he remembered the fourth letter. He had planned to wait to open it, but something inside him urged him not to wait any longer. Michael knew he needed this connection. He needed to feel that his father was still with him, even if in an invisible way, as he always had been. In the small things, in the details the world doesn't see, but which, deep down, are the most powerful. With the letter in hand, Michael slowly tore it open, feeling the weight of the words approaching. He already knew what life had shown him up until that point, but he needed more. He needed to believe that James's presence was still there, that the legacy he had left was not just a memory, but something alive, breathing around him. My son, if you ever need to feel that I'm near, don't look for grand signs. Don't wait for things that might impress you. What I always taught you was to see what is in front of you, in the simple moments. Do you remember our song? The one we sang together? You always laughed at me, saying I had a terrible voice. But you know that for me, the music was never about the perfection of the melody. It was about feeling life, being in the moment, even when the world was rushing. I'll leave small signs for you, small moments. They won't be obvious, but you'll know when you find me there. So my son, when you need me, just look around you. I'll be in the small details. And in each of those moments, know that I'm still with you, guiding you in the most silent but most true way possible. I love you, James. Michael closed his eyes after reading the letter, feeling a wave of emotion take over his body. He knew his father's words were true, but in that moment, he didn't know what to expect. He leaned back on the bench, leaving the letter on his lap, his thoughts drifting back to past moments. His father's song, the one he always sang on quiet mornings, the off-key but genuine sound. Something told him this message was about to manifest in an unexpected way. It was then that the radio in the locker room, which had been turned off, began to play. The first note was soft, but unmistakable. It was the song, the same song James had sung on his Sunday mornings. That simple melody, but full of meaning. Michael felt his stomach twist. He looked around confused. There was no one else there, and the radio was far from any remote control. The sound continued to fill the locker room, and with each note, Michael felt as though his father was truly there, by his side. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't a coincidence. It was the sign he had asked for, that small but powerful moment where the invisible becomes visible. The song was there, just as James had promised. He stood up slowly, his body trembling with emotion. The silence that had settled in the locker room was now filled with something much deeper. Michael couldn't hold back the tears anymore. He knew his father was there, in some way, not physically, but present in every one of the most intimate and genuine moments. Thank you, Dad, Michael whispered, looking at the radio. Thank you for showing me that I'll never be alone. The music played softly, and Michael allowed himself to close his eyes for a moment, immersed in the feeling that, in some way, everything he needed had already been given to him. James's legacy wasn't just about what he did in life, but about what he continued to do, silently, in a way that only an open heart could understand. After the encounter in the locker room and the deep connection with his father, something inside Michael had changed. He no longer felt that the emptiness in his life was an obstacle. On the contrary, he saw that space as fertile ground for something greater, something that could transcend his basketball career and touch lives in a meaningful way. What made the most sense to him was honoring his father's memory in a way that perpetuated the values of love, dedication, and strength that James had always taught him. That same night as he returned home, Michael made a decision. He knew what he had to do: create something that was more than just a project, something that would be a true legacy, something that would transcend his own existence. He began to sketch, in his own words, what would become the James R. Jordan Life Project. The idea was clear. The foundation would be focused on young people who, like him, had lost their parents, but in a way that would give them the tools to rebuild their lives and reach their maximum potential. Michael knew that the emptiness left by the loss of a loved one could be devastating, and he wanted to ensure these young people had the chance to find hope and strength, just as he had found in his father's teachings. Over the following weeks, Michael began to assemble a team of people who shared his vision. He wanted a foundation that was more than just financial help. He wanted a foundation that would be a true school of life, a place where young people could learn not only technical skills, but also how to deal with pain, loss, and overcoming adversity. Michael also knew that, to give credibility to the project, he needed someone who represented what he was trying to achieve. And that's when Daniel came back into the picture. He was already thriving in his life, and his transformation was visible to everyone around him. But there was something more about Daniel. He represented the essence of the foundation, someone who had overcome his own struggles with Michael's help, and who now was ready to inspire others. It was only natural that he would become the first ambassador of the James R. Jordan Life Project. The launch ceremony was simple, but full of emotion. Michael took the stage, with Daniel by his side, and spoke about what the project meant to him. When my father passed, a part of me was lost, but something he always told me was that, despite the pain, we must find a way to move forward. He always believed that when you help others, you help yourself. Today, with the launch of this foundation, we are fulfilling the legacy of the man who taught me to never give up, to always believe in what is possible. The audience was attentive, and Daniel, with eyes full of gratitude, was called to join Michael on stage. He stood up, emotional, and spoke about the impact the project had had on his own life. "I am living proof that when someone cares, life can change. Michael helped me find a path, but now it's my turn to help. I am here, not only as the ambassador of this foundation, but as someone who believes in the power of community, education, and support. If I can overcome the pain, so can you." The event was a milestone, not just for Michael, but for everyone involved. The foundation began to receive support from companies, former players, coaches, and many others who believed in the positive impact it could have. More than that, it began to be a place where young people not only found hope, but also learned how to become leaders in their own lives. As the foundation grew, Michael and Daniel continued to work side by side, with Daniel becoming a role model for the young people who came to the program. Together, they traveled to underserved communities, visited schools, talked to other young people about the challenges of life and how to overcome them. And in each of these encounters, Daniel was proof of what was possible when someone had the right support and the determination to move forward. But Michael knew this was only the beginning. The James R. Jordan Life Project would not just be a foundation, it would be a movement. And with every step taken, he felt that his father was, in some way, walking with him. James's legacy was alive, not in words or memories, but in concrete actions that were changing lives in a deep and lasting way. It was a peaceful afternoon, but Michael felt the weight of a new journey approaching. The foundation was thriving, and he had become a symbol of hope for so many, but something inside him still felt an inexplicable emptiness. The criticisms, the watchful eye of the world, and even the internal doubts began to manifest in a different way. Success, as sweet as it was, brought with it constant pressure to maintain an image of perfection, and he began to question what truly mattered. Then he received the fifth letter. It was not filled with words about great feats or inspiring phrases. It was a simple letter, but full of meaning, a reminder from his father about what really matters, what is not seen by the public, but rather the actions taken in silence, far from the spotlight. "My son, I know the world is watching you. It always will, waiting for you to do something grand, something worthy of applause. But I need you to understand one thing. True value is not in what the world sees. Value is in what your heart does in silence, in the moments when no one is looking. Remember all the times you were alone on your journey, when no one believed in you, when the world doubted your ability, your character, your capacity. I was there, not on the cameras, but in every silent conversation we had, in every word I told you to keep going, even when the path seemed impossible. You will learn that the greatest measure of who you are doesn't come from others' approval, but from your own understanding of what is right. Even when no one else believes in you, even when it seems like you're fighting alone, I want you to know that you're not. The value of your journey is not in being applauded, but in staying true to who you really are. Don't seek recognition because it will never come at the right time. It will never be enough. What matters is that you know deep in your heart that you did what was right, and that's what always mattered to me. I love you, my son, and I will always be with you. James Michael closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his father's words fill his heart. Those words seemed to have been written just for him in that moment when doubts about his own path seemed to grow. He remembered the times he faced criticism, both in basketball and outside of it. There were moments when people doubted his ability, his skill to transform the game, his integrity as a man. Behind the scenes, James was always there, silently defending him, never seeking recognition. He recalled a night many years ago when he was under extreme pressure, about to face one of the biggest criticisms of his career. The media was on him. Many said he could no longer be the leader the Chicago Bulls needed. He was about to retire, feeling powerless. But his father, James, showed up unexpectedly. It wasn't a grand visit, but a simple conversation between father and son. "You're going to get through all this," James told him that night. "Trust me and trust yourself. The world will judge you, but what matters is what you do when no one is watching. That's your legacy." In that moment, Michael realized that his true journey would not be measured by the victories the world saw, but by the silent and courageous actions he took when he was alone. James had always been there, every step taken in the quiet of the night when no one was watching. Now more than ever, Michael understood the meaning of those words. He stood up from the bench and looked out the window. The sun was beginning to set, and he knew the future was waiting for him, but now he had a new perspective. He didn't need the world's validation. What mattered was staying true to his father's legacy, and more importantly, staying true to himself. "Thank you, Dad," Michael whispered, holding the letter in his hands. "I'll keep going for you and for me." It was a peaceful night, without big thoughts or worries, but with an inexplicable sense of peace. Michael was in his room alone, lying on his bed. There was no rush for tomorrow. He felt a certain relief, as if something inside him had finally settled. The days had been intense, both physically with the foundation's commitments and emotionally, with the memories of his father and the letters he had read. There was, however, something still unresolved, something Michael couldn't fully understand. As he closed his eyes, fatigue took over him, and without realizing it, he fell into a deep sleep. But what happened in his dream would shake him deeply. He found himself sitting on a park bench. The soft light of the evening bathed everything around him. There was no rush, no disturbing sounds, just the peace of the moment. At his side was his father, James. Michael looked at him, and James, with a serene smile, looked back. They didn't say anything. It was a silent conversation, but it seemed to speak volumes. The sparkle in James's eyes seemed deeper than ever. He didn't need to speak. His gaze said everything. Michael felt his father's presence in a way he had never experienced before. It was as if time had stopped. He was no longer bound by the struggles of the outside world, nor the weight of the expectations that had always accompanied his public life. He was there, sitting on that bench with his father, in a state of purity that could not be described in words. Michael didn't need to ask anything. He knew. James's gaze conveyed the wisdom he had always had. There was something more being passed to him in that moment, something Michael could never have understood with his rational mind, but that his heart now comprehended. The love, peace, and tranquility that James had always emanated were there, beside him, silently. Michael woke abruptly. The room was dark, and the sound of his breathing was still audible in the silence of the night. He sat up in bed, lightly sweating, with his heart beating faster. The sensation of the dream was still fresh in his mind. He knew something important had happened there, but he couldn't fully understand it. It was then, as he looked around, that he saw something that didn't make sense. A letter was on the pillow, as if it had been placed there recently. The letter was folded with precision, and Michael instinctively picked it up. He felt that the handwriting on the letter had a familiar touch, something that evoked the feeling of those his father had always sent him. But this one, he hadn't placed there. The letter seemed to have materialized from somewhere. He opened it slowly, eager to know what it said. "My son, if you are reading this letter, then the dream we had together was more than just a dream. It was a silent message, like everything we did together. Words are not always necessary to convey what is important. What you saw in our eyes in the park was not just a dream. It was a message you already know, but that you still need to remember. The path will not always be easy, and the world can sometimes be cold and harsh. But deep in your heart, you've always had everything you need. Never doubt that. I will always be with you, not in words, but in your strength and courage. Remember, the love and peace you found beside me in the dream are inside of you. You will carry that forever. Do not look further than what you already have within you. And when you need me, know that, as always, I will be there. With all my love, James." Michael felt a wave of emotion and gratitude take over him. He held the letter with trembling hands, still processing the feeling of being in a place between dream and reality. The encounter with his father hadn't been just a fleeting vision. It was a form of communication that transcended the physical, something he could no longer ignore. He knew that somehow his father would always guide him, even after his passing. With the letter in his hands, Michael leaned back on the bed, closed his eyes, and smiled. He didn't know how, but he felt that everything would be all right. His father was still with him, not only in his dreams, but in his life, in every decision he made, in every silent action he took in his heart. The days that followed the dream with his father were marked by a sense of deep calm. Michael felt more centered, more at peace. The peace he had long sought seemed finally within his reach. He knew there was something waiting for him, but he couldn't pinpoint what. Each step he took now seemed more aligned with his father's legacy, with the promise he had made in his youth. He finally understood that he wasn't just following the path of fame or victories, but something greater, deeper, and more enduring. It was on a serene morning, as he sat at his office desk, reflecting on the past few months, that Michael noticed the presence of the sixth letter. It was there, as always, under his pillow. He remembered the dream he had, the feeling of being with his father, and the letter he had read immediately upon waking. Something inside him told him this letter was different, the final piece of the emotional puzzle he had been putting together. With his hands trembling slightly, Michael opened the letter. As his eyes scanned the written words, a sense of sorrow and gratitude took over him. It was as if the weight of years of searching had finally been relieved. "My dear son, if you are reading this letter, then I know the time has come for me to say goodbye to you in a definitive way. This is not a sad farewell, but one that brings peace to my heart, because I know you have finally fulfilled the promise you made to me when you were still a young man. I have seen you, Michael, and I can say with all my love that you have become the man I always knew you could be. You have found your true essence, the one that has always been inside of you, waiting to be revealed. The man I now see is not just the champion of the courts, but the man who understood what is truly important, the legacy of kindness, love, and truth. You have kept your promise, my son. The world may not understand everything you've done, but that doesn't matter anymore. What matters is what you've done inside your heart. You've changed the lives of so many people in a way that only someone like you could. And that brings me immense joy, more than any trophy or public recognition. Now I can rest in peace because I know you have found your way. You never needed my approval, my son, but I am proud of you in a way I cannot describe. The strength you found within yourself is everything I ever wanted for you. When you need to say goodbye to me, know that I will always be with you, no matter where you go. I will be by your side, in the quiet moments, in the strength you carry, in the wisdom you impart to others. The true farewell is not painful because I know you will be fine. With all my love and pride, James. Michael sat in silence for long minutes after reading those words. His body was still, but his mind was in total revolution. He felt an immense peace fill his heart. For the first time in many years, he felt truly at peace with himself. He had fulfilled the promise he made to his father, a promise to become someone who made a difference, not for fame or recognition, but for the truth and the real impact on people's lives. He slowly got up, holding the letter with trembling hands, as if that were the final piece of the emotional puzzle he had been set to solve. He looked out at the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set, and with a calm smile on his face, he whispered, "I did it, Dad." The years passed, but the truth that Michael carried within him only grew stronger. He became not just a basketball legend, but an example of humanity and generosity, following in the footsteps of his father, James. In every action, in every donation, in every young person he helped, his father's spirit was present, like a constant flame, lighting the way. His foundation, the James R. Jordan Life Project, expanded over time. From a simple project to help orphan youth, it became a global network, supporting thousands of young people who had lost their parents. Many of these young people now followed paths they never imagined, inspired by Michael's own example and the legacy of unconditional love that James always believed was the key to success. At a recent event, a ceremony to honor the beneficiaries of the foundation, Michael was on stage looking at the audience full of hopeful faces and confident smiles. He was not alone. Beside him were some of the young people who had been impacted by his vision, now becoming leaders and beacons of change in their communities. It was a sight he knew his father would approve of, with pride written on his face. He looked up at the sky, as he always did when he felt the need to connect with his father. The sun was beginning to set, the sky turning orange and gold, and Michael felt that same love he had always carried within him. He could feel James there, as he always had been, not physically but in spirit, in his heart, in the choices he made every day. The truth about the love that never dies and the legacy that is perpetuated through simple and powerful actions had never been so clear to him. I am not just Michael Jordan. I am the reflection of everything my father taught me, of every step he guided me through, and of every word he spoke. The true legacy is not about what you achieve for yourself, but about what you leave for the world, and I know my father would be proud. At that moment, a young woman from the audience approached him to speak. She was one of the first people he had helped, now graduated, with a promising future ahead. She held a letter in her hands. "Michael," she said, emotional, "I wanted to give you this. I wrote it, but I felt that you should be the first one to read it." It was a simple letter, but full of meaning. She talked about how the foundation, and especially Michael, had changed her life. "If it weren't for you and what your father did, I wouldn't be here today," she said, her eyes shining. "I will never forget what he taught me, even without knowing me." Michael smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude. He realized once again that the legacy of James, his father, was right there, alive, in the heart of every person touched by his kindness. Their story, that of a man who promised to change another's life, and who fulfilled that promise in a way that echoed through time, was more than just a memory. It was a living force that transformed and would continue to transform lives forever. As the event came to a close, Michael walked out to the parking lot, where his car was waiting for him. He looked at the horizon, the sky now completely dark, with stars beginning to shine. And he knew deep in his heart that the love and wisdom of his father would never leave him. He was the continuation of everything James had represented, and in every young person he helped, in every life he touched, his father's legacy would continue to shine, strong, firm, and eternal. "I love you, Dad," Michael whispered, looking at the stars. And at that moment, he felt the silent response, just as he always had. Love never goes away. It is always there, in the simplest places, in the quietest actions, and in every heart that allows itself to be touched.